Minister, as a government TD, I'm proud to be associated with this budget, and I suppose we have had a lot of lobbying over the last couple of months, and we have been in an unprecedented crisis with the war in Ukraine, and we have made a very, very serious attempt at alleviating the cost of living increases on those who are under the most pressure. And I suppose at times in politics we get a lot of criticism, and a lot of issues are brought to us. But since Tuesday, it has been the amount of calls we've got to say, we're delighted with this budget. There has been a serious attempt made to alleviate the cost of living crisis that people were facing, and I'm delighted to be a government TD who has lobbied and lobbied our ministers for a budget like this, a progressive budget that has really, an unprecedented 11 billion put into the economy and to alleviate the cost of living crisis that was facing us. And I think, it really justifies the reason why we are in government, and the reason why we took up government 2.5 years ago. I suppose, there's two things I would like to see in the finance bill, and I'd just like to raise them with Minister Fleming here this evening, and then go on to aspects of the budget. But one is, a means test for carers allowance for parents with incapacitated children, and this is something I raised in Dáil here a couple of weeks ago. And I suppose, I have an individual family in my constituency who have been put in financial hardship by the conditions of qualification for this scheme. And because the father of the family got a bonus in his employment this year, the mother's carers allowance has been reduced to less than €50 per week. And they have a child who has serious health needs, a child who can't talk, who can't walk, and can't actually swallow. And the child wasn't expected to live beyond 18 months to 2 years, and due to the excellent care that she's receiving in her home, she has now received her first communion this year. But there's not too many of these children in the state, and I would urge in the finance bill that the means test for these parents to qualify for full carers allowance be taken away. And there is precedent for this. They can qualify for a medical card without a means test, and they can qualify for an auxiliary care allowance without a means test. So the number of families who are in this situation is extremely small, and I would urge in the finance bill that this could be looked at again. And families who are in this situation with a child who is needing 24/7 care, a mother who gave up an extremely good job to look after her child and is doing so exceptionally well, I would urge in the finance bill that this would be looked at and given consideration. The other issue, which I've been quoted in the media today, is the concrete levy. And I just want to make it perfectly clear, I fully accept the concept of the concrete levy and recovering money from the industry for the mica and the pyrite. And we see now apartment buildings in Dublin with defects as well. So the bill is going to continue to grow. But I think this levy needs to be postponed for a period of time until the cost of concrete comes back to something like pre-Ukrainian prices. Price of concrete has risen by 50% in the last couple of months, and now to next April to put a 10% levy on it just isn't the time. We all want to see the maximum number of houses built. We all want to control the price of houses. And I was talking to a concrete provider yesterday, and he said this levy will put an extra €120 onto each ready mix, a load of ready mix. And while I fully accept the principle of a levy on concrete going forward, and accept that one has to be there, I would urge in the finance bill that we have penciled in April 23 for it. I would urge that it would be postponed further to allow costs to come back into line. I suppose when I was listening to the minister's speech on Tuesday here in the chamber, and the quote in it, the example was given of a pensioner living alone who was in receipt of the fuel allowance and what he was going to gain in 2023 out of this budget. And the total that person was going to gain was €2,374. And I've never seen in my lifetime such a huge increase, for people on social welfare. And, obviously the cost of living and the cost of fuel this winter is going to be enormous. But this is a huge step in alleviating, a fuel poverty situation which we could have entered into. And, the double weekly payment, the Christmas bonus, a once-off fuel allowance payment, the living alone allowance, a once-off payment, the weekly increase, which is permanent, and the 3 by 200 energy grants. It's a huge attempt. It's a huge attempt by this government to ensure that people are able to stay out of fuel poverty this winter. And as I said, we've been inundated with calls from constituents who really recognise the effort that has been made in this budget, an unprecedented effort that has been made. And again, when you see the example of a working family written down, that a working family with kids in school or in college, that a total, of €5,640 is available to that family from this budget. It really underlines the huge effort that has been made by this government to ensure that the cost of living to families is neutralised. And as I said, it really shows that this government is fully to grips with the crisis situation facing the economy, and has made a huge economic effort to make sure that families aren't in food poverty this winter. Another thing that I want to just speak on in this budget, and is something that I have been pushing for a long time, and that was a separate TAMS budget for climate mitigation measures. And as a farmer, I am fed up with being told what we can't do. And I've always stressed that, all forum that I've been at, is that, my industry, the agri-food industry, wants to concentrate on producing sustainable food. And, I would judge all climate mitigation measures by the fact that if they don't impact on our ability to produce sustainable food in this country, they are a success. But if they do impact on our ability to produce food, they are a failure. But this separate budget for TAMS that's been introduced, and it's directed at solar panels at the moment, and the erection of solar panels on farm buildings. I would urge, that would be broadened out further to include, whether it is aeration of slurry, constant aeration of slurry, rubbers on slats, different fertilisers, which have significantly less runoff, the production, of organic pelleted fertiliser. There is so many things that we can do within the agri-food sector to reduce our emissions and meet our emissions targets. And this 90 million that has been put into this separate TAMS budget, and it was the point that I made very strongly to Mr McConnell, that we have a TAMS budget for infrastructure, and we needed a separate TAMS budget to tackle climate change. And I'm delighted that that has been recognised in this budget, and it's a huge step forward in our task to meet the 25% emissions reduction target that was agreed a couple of months ago. And we can really build on this now and drive forward. There's also 3 million allocated over the next 4 years to kick-start a farm-based anaerobic digestion. Again, this is hugely welcome, and there's a huge amount of technology out there, and the farms in Europe, are ahead of us on this. And if you go into a farm in Europe, there is, the animals on the farm are producing an income, but they also have an energy income that's being produced, a valuable source of income. And we can go a long ways towards our renewable targets as regards energy inside the farm gate. And I'm delighted to see these initiatives in the budget. I have worked extremely hard within the parliamentary party to push in this agenda, and thankfully, I was getting a very receptive response. But it's when you see the proof of the pudding is in the eating, and the money now has been put in place, and I think we have to continue to build on that. Yesterday evening, I had Mr McConnell in Lachine, in my own constituency, visiting the Bioeconomy Research Centre, and again, that is a vehicle that can be used with the technology that's being produced there, to produce the modern technology to allow us to meet our targets in agriculture going forward. And you know, we've seen it. We've seen one project coming out of there already, where used plastic is being turned into a wax in the former Bornamona plant in Littleton, where you know used plastic is being turned into a valuable commodity that can be used for glue and for other commodities going forward. And that is where we have to go as an industry, and that can only be done with investment. And I'm delighted, you know, as a TD for my constituency of Tipperary, to see that investment. And you know, that investment in this budget, and we will, with this kind of investment and these kind of initiatives, we will be able to go a long ways towards meeting our 25% target as regards the reduction of emissions. But it had to be in budget 2023. We had been, you know, slow off the mark in this kind of investment in the past, but we now have our separate budget for it, and I think, you know, I suppose, you know, while we have a huge lot of positive things in this budget, this initiative as regards, you know, how the agri-food industry is going to meet its targets under climate change is most welcome, and I'm delighted to be associated with this budget.
Thank you very much.